Well, hello and welcome to the Profit Express. I'm Tim Healy, and I'm inviting you to join me each and every Wednesday so together we can win the battle for business. That's right, and we do it here and only here right on the Profit Express. So thanks for sharing some of your time with me today. Thanks for being on board. Now, today's guest and her story are quite remarkable. It started in 2007 when today's guest, Carrie Kerpen, started her very first business with $10,000 in the bank and zero entrepreneurial experience. 14 years later, she sold her business for 8 figures. Wow. Now, by any measure, that is the American dream realized. It is a fairy tale exit. Tremendous story. But the problem with that is Carrie, as a woman-owned business and having exited for 8 figures, is unfortunately quite the exception. And even though women's own businesses is growing at a much higher rate than men, I'm just going to share some stats. See, the statistics are encouraging and discouraging all at the same time. So what do I mean? Again, women-owned businesses are opening up at a much higher rate than men. However, the revenue generated by all women-owned businesses is just basically 6.2% of the total U.S. revenue generated by businesses. Now, you look at something else that's positive. Between 2019 and 2024, revenue from women-owned businesses experienced a 54% increase. Again, outpacing men-owned businesses during that same period. These are some great numbers. But then what happens, despite that, in 2024, an average revenue generated by a woman-owned business was about less than half of that of her male counterpart. And here's another really alarming statistic. As of 2022, according to PitchBook, all fully female-owned businesses, founded companies, were capturing less than 1% of exit value. So on one hand, women-owned businesses, they're starting at a much greater rate than men. The revenue generated is growing, but there's something that's not happening. They're not creating businesses that can scale and sell. So again, why do we have Carrie Kerpen on today? Not only did she create a great business, a really likable business that she sold for 8 figures, but it's in her experience that now she has a new cause, a new mission, and a new book. As you can see, The Whisper Way, the secret formula for women entrepreneurs to scale and sell for life-changing money. So I'm excited to have Carrie back on the show. I had her on a few years ago with another book that she had written, which I'd certainly recommend that one. Work It, Secrets for Success from the Boldest Women in Business, which I think Carrie certainly qualifies as one of the boldest women in business. So today, again, what we want to do, I want to share Carrie's message. I want to share her book, again, The Whisper Way, and it's about helping women realize the value that they're creating and what they need to do in developing a business from start to scale to selling it to create life-changing kind of value. Because according to the statistics, it's just not happening today. So hey, it's a great pleasure to have back on board the Profit Express, Carrie Kerpen. How are you today?
I am great, Tim. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
No, it's my pleasure. So you started the business in 2007. You had $10,000, which is just a tiny little amount, as you know. I love the zero entrepreneurial experience. And then fast forward 14 quick years. I know it probably went like that. It's 2021. And in the book, you sold Likeable Media for 8 figures. And you described the process you went through as scary and arduous.
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you?
Well, remember, when I started Likeable, which was one of the world's first social media agencies, I started it with $10,000 in the bank, which was wedding gifts. My husband and I got married in an epic public sponsored wedding, and all of the sponsors said, "You guys have to do something. We're going to bet on you." And so we launched Likeable. And when we did, it was us together. And that was so great because I had a partner who also had very little entrepreneurial experience, but somebody to be in the trenches with. And we ran the business together through 2013. But in 2013, he launched as a serial entrepreneur several other businesses. And so there I was left with Likeable, growing it and getting ready to sell it. It took about 7 years from the time I was on my own to the time I actually sold it, but I was determined to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, when I finally got there, I'll tell you, Tim, I felt really alone. I started looking for other women who had had this experience that were similar to me. And it felt like they didn't exist. And, anyone who goes through a sale of a business will tell you, regardless of gender, it is arduous. They are going through every piece of data you've ever built in your company. They're asking you every pressing question. It's a little bit like fundraising, but even more so because you're so into every single detail that already exists versus like selling on a dream. And here you really have to like prove everything. And it was really, really hard. And the thing that I noticed was just that I felt utterly alone. And after I sold, I really wanted to see if that was the case. Like, were there really so few women? Like I had built, you mentioned my book earlier, my previous book, I have built a huge network of women. And so you would think I would have women who had built and sold, and yet there were so few. And so I had to see if that was, was it that they didn't exist, or was it that I just wasn't connected to them? And I think the answer was they exist, but they're few and far between.
So obviously, and again, in the previous book work, you have your own network of obviously a lot of very successful women, whether they're executives or other business owners, but not at the point that you were at of selling a business.
A woman who has taken her business through to exit. It just was really, really, really hard to find. And so I knew that other women, however small the subset, who were building businesses, who would get to exit, needed other women like them. And that women who hadn't even thought about exiting were leaving so much money on the table because they opened these businesses. What you talked about with revenue earlier, I heard on the intro, like women are starting businesses a lot of the time because we have children. We are home. We feel like we have to rebuild our careers. We don't want to work in the typical confines of corporate America. And so we're going to try and start something, but we're not necessarily going to be out there raising capital. The data will show that it's extremely difficult to do so. The data will also show that we're more risk averse. We play it safe. That's why women run really profitable companies, because they really operate, pretty methodically. And I think what happens is we open these businesses that are either services based or like, interior design firms, things like that. And we don't even realize that exit is an option. And so for women who were getting to exit, I felt they needed support. And women who didn't even realize they could, I felt they needed education.
And that's the book, obviously, is why you wrote it, The Whisper Way. But this is what's interesting. And as I'm reading the book, I'm a male business owner. And, obviously, I have the male perspective, not the female perspective.
Yeah.
But the book is a great read, male or female, by the way. But
totally. And gender doesn't really make a difference in the fact that if you build a good business, you will have a sellable business. It's just really the awareness. There's two things. First, when you talked about the PitchBook data of less than 1%, primarily that comes down to fundraising, right? So if you have companies that raise funds that have rocket fuel on them, they're going to sell for more. It doesn't mean the founder captures more, by the way, but they will sell for more. And then the other stat in the book that's really, really interesting was a study over 10 years that showed, really 1% of businesses that sold, period, were female founded, not just the value. And that has to do with women really starting to open businesses and not even realizing that exit is an option.
Now, you said something just a moment ago. You said, so if a woman gets a business to the point of it's sellable and having it, creating an exit strategy, they leave a lot on the table. They leave a lot of money on the table. Now, So if you're looking to, somebody's listening to the show and they're like, okay, if a business is valuable, it has value, they go under the hood, they check all the numbers, all the data, all the dollars and cents, it has real value. How is a woman leaving more on the table than a man?
Well, a woman doesn't necessarily leave more on the table than a man. A man can leave just as much money on the table. But if a woman does not have the education to realize that she has a sellable business, she will often just close it up or just give it to an employee or do something along those lines because she doesn't even realize it's an option. Now, in terms of value, because I assume you have listeners of both genders, you look at a business and you say, okay, I've built this business. It has this much in revenue and this much in profit. It's in this category. It should be worth X, right? Mm-hmm. There's a range of value for every company. But the reality is that a business is worth whatever someone's going to pay for it. Right. And so the idea is that you need to build strong business fundamentals and then come up with the reason that business acquisition would be so strategic to an acquirer that the numbers and the multiples, which is typically how you value a business, sort of matter less. They're used to validate the floor, but the ceiling is infinite.
So I have like three questions going through my head at one moment right here.
Yeah. I'm here for it.
So it's a big question, but I want to just jump into it.
Do it. Go for it.
The book is The Whisper Way. What is the Whisper Way?
Yep. So Whisper, after I sold, I started thinking about what really made the business as successful as it was, what allowed me to extract the multiple that I did, what got me over the finish line. And I started thinking about the business fundamentals, and I'm a big fan of acronyms. And Whisper stands for the 7 tenets needed to build a highly sellable business as told through a female lens, not exclusively through a female lens, not exclusively for women. All businesses have sort of the same business fundamentals, but told in a way that I think can really resonate with women who did not realize that this was even an option. So Whisper stands for understanding your why. So really understanding how much you need to extract. Why are you stopping? And how much you need to stop? And is that in line with reality? So that's looking at then first understanding your why. Why are you doing this?
Right.
Then your how for H, understanding what are the multiples. Is your picture of what this business could be worth in range with reality, understanding how the market works and how businesses are valued. Then there's your income, understanding how to make your income strong. 2 businesses with $5 million in revenue could be worth completely different things depending on the type of business and the type of revenue. Not all revenue is created equal. So your why, your how, your income, your secret sauce, what makes you different, or your moat, if you will, your profit. As we know on Profit Express, profit is the single most important thing. And then your executive team for E. So why, how, income, secret sauce, profit, exec team. And then finally your roar factor, which is really around the confidence and resilience that's needed to get across the table during due diligence. It's, 50% of deals that are started don't close. And so we want to make sure that when we get into this, we have what's needed to get across the finish line. Because when I say arduous, Tim, I mean, it's really, really hard.
Yeah. So in your experience, in your networking, the people who you've spoken to, who've been introduced to you, I want to sure get this right. You have found that with women in particular, they could have built this successful business, but they haven't even given themselves the credit or have a mindset that, hey, this is something valuable that I can actually sell.
How about the fact that they have built a successful business, but they don't realize it? The thing is, I just saw a TikTok the other day. I just saw one with a guy on there who's like, we don't even, a business ain't nothing until it's got 2 million in EBITDA. And then we're going to talk about selling. That's complete bull. That is honestly complete bull. There are 6-figure businesses, Main Street businesses that sell all the time. And these women are getting these messages all the time that they're too small. They're not valuable. They're not interesting enough for an acquirer. And in reality, some of these businesses, these small businesses businesses are more easily acquired and have a more lucrative deal when you own 100% of a business versus when you take on a ton of debt to grow it. Like, it can be really, really lucrative. I just think they don't know.
So it's a complete lack of awareness what it comes down to, really.
Yeah. I mean, it's not every woman. It's not to say every woman has a lack of awareness. We're all out there. In fact, there was some really great data from Wells Fargo recently that talked about how women now, are looking at exit readiness as a critical component to what they're doing as they're building. And that, to me, like, makes my heart sing. Truly. I think we're using it as a focus because I just don't think we've been in the rooms where it's been discussed. We're opening these businesses at such a fast rate that, we just haven't really been in this position before. So to me, I saw such a huge market opportunity there, such an opportunity. I could help close the exit gap. I could help do that if I just got the information in women's hands fast enough. And so I started with the book and then led to my company, The Whisper Group.
The Whisper Group is, because I want to make sure people know.
Oh, the Whisper Group is an exit readiness advisory practice for women-owned businesses. I match female founders with women who have exited in their vertical or space to give them critical advice and prep work to get their business ready when they are thinking about, they're usually about a year or two out from sale, getting ready.
So in the book, one thing you mentioned that, and I'm paraphrasing, you said one of the reasons that it's harder for women to sell is they have kind of identified a lack of mentorship. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to find women like you who've sold a business. It's not for lack of mentors in life, but in this particular area, when you're looking for, I'm looking for a woman who sold a business, who understands what it's like to be sitting in a room full of men that are questioning you about the veracity of your numbers, then yes, it is much, much harder to find that. Now, that's not to say we don't have amazing mentors in men, because we do. I did, absolutely. So it's not to say that women only need other women to do this. But when you are in a space with another woman who has done it before, you feel safer to ask certain questions that you might not ask of somebody that is not having a similar experience or experiencing like some of the levels of just what goes on in a room sometimes that feels really uncomfortable.
Now, one thing that you mentioned in the book, and I've heard it in with women in general. I mean, there's something that, a woman has to feel that in order to apply for a job, she has 100% of the qualifications, where a man would wing it if they felt they had half the qualifications. Yeah. So there's that confidence factor. They're, a little bit more risk adverse, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is one thing that I found really interesting in your story in the book. And again, today's guest, Carrie Kerpen, the book, The Whisper Way. You had mentioned that despite the Fairytale exit, despite the 8 figures, which, there's plenty of people would sign up for that today.
Yep.
You had at a point in, I don't know exactly when, but in that process, maybe even after the sale, I want you to talk about this. You still felt that you suffered from or felt imposter syndrome. Oh, how the heck do you feel imposter syndrome?
How do you feel imposter syndrome when you're dealing with that?
Yeah, after you just sold your business for 8 figures.
Yeah, I think that it's very easy to feel imposter syndrome, especially when you're looking at the world we live in today, right? If you look on Instagram or TikTok, everybody is a multimillionaire and you've got people with $100 million, blah, 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 blah. What I learned over time, I think there's 2 things. With imposter syndrome, I tend to feel imposter syndrome, if I say that, which I don't always subscribe to, but if I do, I tend to feel that when I'm feeling less competent in something. So a good example would be, I sold this business. Now I'm going to go into helping other women sell their businesses. Well, am I qualified just because I sold my own business, or do I need to get a little bit more competent? Do I need to really hone my own skills before I take that to market? And I think for me, that was really essential. Like after I sold, I tested this idea. I said, okay, I'm going to buy this. I'm going to build this community of women who've exited. And then I'm going to create a matching system and I'm going to train them in my methodology. But what is my methodology? I had no entrepreneurial experience prior to Likeable, built it and sold it. So what I did was I decided that I was going to get certified in exit planning advisory work. I went to HBS. I did a bunch of different things to give myself the minimum viable competence to feel like I could be confident. Now, I didn't need to meet 100% of the qualifications. In other words, I wasn't going to go out there and go back to school fully to go, and go get a license in 8 billion different things, or go to law school or any of those things like that. What I wanted to do, though, was make sure that I got enough to validate that my experience was not only strong, but it was sound. It was rooted in business fundamentals. So many, that's why so many entrepreneurs who are so successful never ended up going to school or never ended up doing any of that. Like, we just did it. And so it's just instinct. And so I think the way that I get around that kind of imposter syndrome is to give myself that kind of confidence by investing in some stuff that makes me feel a little more confident. And I think that with exit planning, we can definitely overcome and increase our confidence by learning about what exiting is like. And to do that, we need people like us to be able to talk to.
Right. Now, in the book, for those who haven't read it yet, it is the way you structured it. It's part fable, right?
Yeah.
You have there's the character Ramona, okay?
Yes.
Carrie Kerpen, I'm assuming. And you have this retreat, okay, this first invitation where it was about half a dozen women-owned business owners. I think
there were 8. It was 7 because each one had a challenge related to one of the challenges of Whisper. Wendy for why, Hannah for how, Ivy for income. So it all links back.
Beautiful. And I actually, it was funny when you were kind of teeing up the book and you said it was fable based. I'm like, fable based? I'm like, what? Like, I was reading it up. I'm like, oh, interesting. But I love the way you did it. It was just, it was fun. It was really fun. It was very, very relatable. And then obviously the learning lessons at the end of each with, your experiences or other female entrepreneurs.
Yep.
What has the experience been for you writing a book like this?
Oh, well, writing the book like this is very healing. So I think my experience, even growing Likeable, was so fear-based, Tim. Like, it was so fear-based. Like, I was running that like scarcity machine. It's really amazing that I got to where I did. I was working on this recently. I was talking about mindset and scarcity. And I said, one of the problems is that I had a scarcity mindset and was really focused on like holding it all together and that it could go away at any moment.
Okay.
And I still sold for 8 figures. And a coach said to me, she said, I said, that worked for me. So maybe I've taught myself that scarcity is good. And she said, right, it worked for you. But imagine what you could have done if you weren't based on a scarcity mindset. Could have sold for $100 million. And that to me really, really resonated. So I think for me, the book was really about how to help women have a similar or greater experience to the one I had, but without all of the heartache, without all of the fear, without all of the, we all have fear, right? When we're running businesses, but the level of like risk aversion and financial anxiety and all of it, like, it just really could have been avoided. And so I feel like the book to me is like something I want to hand to every single business owner that's making their way through, that feels the way I felt. This is great.
So again, we spoke earlier in the show that the process was arduous and scary. Now, again, they open up they open up the hood, they look at all the numbers, everything. You're completely exposed. Nothing is secret anymore.
Yeah, you can't hide. Correct.
So take me back to, I believe at one point in the book, you kind of described you were sitting across the table, the table, and was it all men or predominantly men? What was that?
It's all men. A lot of times it's all men because they're decision makers in that position. And women, this is the other thing, women are not really acquiring businesses because they would not take on that risk to acquire. They would only maybe build to sell. And so I'm trying to help women acquire businesses because it's very, very feasible to do. And those are my favorite deals. I just announced one today where 2 women-owned businesses, one woman-owned business acquired another, and they're forming this large collective. And it's very, very healing work. But yeah, I was sitting across from all men who are very nice men, by the way,
Yeah.
lovely, but you do feel sort of like you're a sheep in a lion's den, if that makes sense. Like you're just sitting there. And I, the whole time, because of my own mindset, was thinking like, oh my gosh, this deal will fall through or it won't work, or, I'm not really worth this. I mean, imagine you started it with wedding money and then like you're talking 8 figures. It's like, I'm like, is this real? Is this going to happen? And like, it just, it was really scary, but I had to look confident and I had to act confident and I had to really like pull it together.
I'm going to take a slight detour in our conversation, Carrie. So I'm driving to the studio. A client calls me and I said, I'm heading to the studio. I'm doing a show. And I tell him who I'm interviewing. And I said, by the way, I got to tell you how they got married. And your wedding story, do you mind can you give us, because I mean, just the creativity of that story and the hustle of that story, I absolutely love it. Can you give us a quick 30,000 foot on that one?
Yes. I mean, whenever I have a thought that's negative or worrisome, I always use like evidence-based thinking. And I think if I pulled off that wedding, I could probably pull off anything. So my husband is a larger than life. It's true. Husband's a larger than life personality, wanted a big wedding, everyone he's ever known, not just like friends from high school, but like the entire internet before the internet. Like he's that kind of guy. It's like really, really wonderful in that way. And yet I knew there was nowhere that we could afford to have such a wedding or even hold such a wedding in New York City. Like how could we really realistically have 1,000 people at a wedding? Like it's just, of course, we just couldn't. And so, I wanted him to have what he wanted. And so one day we were sitting at a diner and it just came out of my mouth, which was like, hey, we both love the Mets. Let's pitch the minor league affiliate of the New York Mets, the Brooklyn Cyclones. We can say, we'll buy out your night for sponsorships and we'll resell in sponsors. And in between innings, instead of Pepsi tossing T-shirts into the audience, 1-800-Flowers will toss bridal bouquets and it'll be cute and campy and fun. We'll get married on the field. We'll raise money for charity. We'll get some press. And everybody we know can come and eat hot dogs and drink beer and watch us get married. Well, the second that came out of my mouth, I was in big trouble because I knew that we were going to have to make that happen and pull it off. But we did. Oh, yeah. We raised $100,000 in sponsored stuff for our wedding. We had raised $20,000 for the National MS Society. And, we got all of this press. And so the sponsors, after it happened, came to us and were like, we would bet on you guys. Like, you should do something. And this is where we had no entrepreneurial experience. But we decided to start an agency based on great word of mouth marketing. And that was in 2007. And Facebook opened beyond the college market. And then we were like, oh my goodness, social media is the fastest form of word of mouth marketing. Let's go. And so Dave and I launched Likeable together. We grew it together. He was really the visionary of that company and was the growth engine. And I was this is how I came up with that scarcity complex, because I was holding it all together by a thread. We were growing so quickly and I was just trying to make sure we functioned. And so when he left, I had to step into those shoes. And I was really it was really a tough go for me to be able to do that, let alone focus on building the business fundamentals. We had grown when he left, we had grown so fast that we had gotten the critical traction that was needed, but we did not have necessarily like the profit because we were growing so much and we had to keep staffing and we had these Fortune 500 clients that paid on a slow pay cycle. And so it was very, very challenging. And so when I came in, my focus was really to try and operationalize for profitability and steady growth so that we could eventually get to exit.
Wow. One hell of a story. One hell of a story.
Wow.
I love it.
It's a goodie. It's an old one, but it's one of my favorites. Really, the start of it all.
It's classic. I mean, that is absolutely classic.
A classic Kerpen tale.
I love it.
A classic Kerpen tale. It's true.
Okay. Getting back to the Whisper Way.
Yep.
You have women-owned businesses, female business owners listening. They're beginning to hear your message and they're thinking, oh my God, what could I be sitting on? How do I take this into something that can be scalable and sellable? So somebody's listening now, they're going to be buying and reading the book as a result of listening. I know that. So here's the question. With the women that you've been introduced to and spoken to, what are some of the first things that they have to wrap their head around? What are some of the first and most common mistakes that they're making that they have to adjust to put themselves in that direction of having a scalable, sellable business?
Okay, there's two real areas that I want women to focus on. The first is profit. The thing is, we tend to pay ourselves last and we tend to invest, heavily in the business. And that's great. But generally, if you're in a space where you're working towards exit, nobody wants to buy an unprofitable business. You're going to want to buy a business that has the ability to make you money. You're not buying it for funsies. You're buying it because it makes money and you're going to be valued off of that profit most of the time, unless you're in the old days of tech, you were valued a lot of times on revenue. Sometimes you're valued on revenue. The majority of time you're valued on profit. So I want women to understand that paying themselves is actually good for the company. Showing that your company is profitable is a win for all. And when you figure out how to make yourself more profitable, you're not being selfish. You're actually being business savvy. And the second thing I want you to think about is that not all income is created equal. In the book, I talk a lot about and have an exercise around money and how income into the business should really be, even though we talk about income being in the black as a good thing and in the red as a bad thing, I talk about keeping your income red, which is recurring, expected, and diversified. So if you have an agency and it's one agency has one $3 million client and they have $3 million worth of business, generally that business is going to be harder to sell than a business that is $3 million that has 10 $300,000 clients, because the idea is it's more diversified, it's safe. Acquirers are lazy. They do not want to have a headache and buy a headache. They want to have really a safe bet when they are acquiring a business. And so you want to make sure that your revenue is something that you can really predict, that it repeats, and that it's not all eggs in one basket. So keep your income red, recurring, expected, diversified. And when you're planning strategically, think about that. And then, just really allow yourself to dream about where you want to go with this business. That's what I would say for sure.
Well said. Well said. The message is a great message in the book. Obviously, there's a special part of that message for women-owned businesses, of course. But again, honestly, I read it as a male business owner. There's a ton of great stuff in that book.
It appeals to all. It does appeal to all. The reason it is so applicable for women is just that it's introduced as a newer concept.
Right.
Versus, this is something we all know, It allows you to not feel dumb when you're going through and asking some of these questions. Like that's the thing. I didn't ask questions at the people. I just was like, and I'd go and Google it after, And so that was really, really tough. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
Sure.
Well, listen, this has been a great conversation. We could keep going. It's just so amazing. But are you okay knowing that you're taking on the role of trailblazer visionary to help women get FU money and have a fairy tale exit? You will be leading the charge.
Yes. So I feel that it is a calling and it is my duty to help give back to other women.
I love it.
It is my life's work. It is what I absolutely believe in. And by the way, when I say FU money, like this shirt, I don't know if you see it today. I'm wearing
Of course I see. Yeah.
It's exited female founder money. So you know what I'm saying? It could be any amount, as long as it's an amount that makes you happy, that you feel like you've accomplished something great. I don't care if you sell for 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, 9 figures.
Right.
If you're accomplishing your goals, the thing is, none of these women, and men too, by the way, when you sell a business, almost nobody I know stops and sits on a beach unless they're older or really in a space where they can't work anymore. I think ideally, these guys are all starting something new. And so that's the other case about selling a business. Like there's no reason to feel totally trapped in a business that you're in. You can evolve and have many, many different careers. For me, when I sold Likeable, if I held on to it longer, it would have appreciated further. I just feel like for me, I was ready to go into this new chapter of my life. And so there's a season for everything. So FU money is all about, making those choices and having that freedom.
Love it. And like you said, it goes down to the why. Everybody's why is different. Everybody's why is different.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll leave with this. People, connecting with you, the book, the message, how do they connect?
Oh my gosh. Find me on Insta or LinkedIn anytime. It is Carrie Kerpen, easy to find. The website is wearethewhispergroup.com. And of course, you can find The Whisper Way anywhere books are sold.
Love it. Carrie, thanks for being on board. Thanks for tackling the topic. Love the book. Great conversation.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me on. It's a great show.
You got it. Be good. And this is the Profit Express. Today's guest, as you know, Carrie Kerpen, The Whisper Way, and check it out. The secret formula for women entrepreneurs to scale and sell for life-changing money. It was such an incredible story. Carrie's story, the Kerpen story, is a great story as to how she got here. Great read. And it's about mindset, knowing what's really possible when you're creating a business, and having that confidence to know that you might just be creating something that can sell for some FU money. So until next time, this is the Profit Express.